Williamsburg has a wonderful farmers market with local produce, musicians, even hosts an art fair. What does it mean to you as a community farmer who supports it through the local Master Gardener program?
Well, I certainly hope it is. I think that one of the important aspects of the new model that we're trying to perfect here is a return to authenticity, a return to a more complete knowledge of where the food comes from and what role that food production plays in our local community. And if anything we do can inspire others to follow in those footsteps, I really strongly believe that that can only be a positive.
The first colonists found growing crops difficult here, so they concentrated on tobacco and cotton as cash crops. What food crops do you find are best fitted to Tidewater, Virginia?
Well, I think it's probably a lot easier to talk about the crops I find not to be particularly suited to Tidewater. But you know, we do have a lot of success growing what I consider to be, you know, the best kinds of produce to try to grow in a home garden. Things like peppers or tomatoes. There's no substitute for, in my opinion, for a homegrown tomato, and nothing you can find in stores and supermarkets really comes close. So I think I'm pretty grateful that we're able to successfully grow those favorites here.
Is it much harder to be an organic farmer than to grow crops intensively? What do you think?
One of the things I was most surprised about when I began this farming adventure was frequently I would find myself coming up against what I thought to be these deeply held beliefs, these black and white hard stops where there were convictions about growing food and gardening that I simply couldn't find a way around, or I wasn't willing to compromise on. And in terms of more or less difficult, I'm starting to look at what I do as a grower more as a hierarchy or a decision tree. And there are some aspects of growing organically that may be more difficult than if I'd be able to use commercially produced or industrial petrochemicals. But there are a give and take for all of those. So I might gain convenience in one aspect or another, but I would have to build systems or structures to facilitate the use of those chemicals in a safe way. And so what I've tried to focus on is finding a balance that allows me to get to the food that I would like to eat. And as long as we're moving towards growing that food, I think we're on the right track.
You distribute produce directly to customers throughout the growing season. Do you think they are mostly interested because the food is fresh, local and organic? Or is it just convenience of home delivery or competitive price that pulls them in?
Well, I think if there's really anything new that we're working on in our model here, it's trying to operate in a more convenience-focused context than farms have in the past. And farms in the past have relied on, in my experience, if they were family farms, a farm stand on a roadside or a stall at a farmer's market or a flea market. And what we see happening recently is the increase in food delivery services, and I think it's an interesting conversation to have if that's necessarily a good or a bad thing moving forward, but I think it is part of the reality. And if, again, there is something new that we can bring to how a community experiences their local farm, it's to embrace the larger context of how people are starting to consume food and provide the authenticity that we offer into that context.
As a gardener, I have lots of challenges here. Drainage from heavy clay, marauding deer and moles, erratic rain, risk of drought. What are your biggest problems?
Well, everyone is welcome here. Everyone is welcome to come by and visit. I thoroughly enjoy when our customers come by and see and learn firsthand where their food is grown. They get their hands in the dirt. It's an eye-opening experience often. And one of the things we pride ourselves in is that this is the way we choose to grow food. It's as close to home gardening as we can keep it. And we try to anyway, make some clever decisions that allow us to scale up what might happen in the home garden. So for us, we have the same challenges as any home gardener would. And we hope that when people do visit, when we talk to them, that they can take what we do and bring it home with them. But for us, I would have to say our biggest single challenge is trying to grow succulent leafy greens with just the oppressive heat. Later in the summer, it feels like working in a jungle, and I have a little bit of experience with working in a jungle.
At planting and harvest time, what farm machinery do you use? Or are the jobs mostly done by hand?
Well, all of our plots are on either rented or leased land, or are graciously donated to our mission by some truly generous people. We're lucky to have them. So we do have equipment to maintain the immediate area around our plots: lawnmowers, weed eaters, those types of things. The only power equipment that we use in our farming process is a somewhat large but still home grade tiller, and we do an initial tilling when we're first converting land over into our use, and in that capacity, it's really only limited to working organic matter into the soil to help set us up for success in the future. Everything else is done by hand, and copious amounts of diligence and sweat.